So we've already taken care of all the hand plane storage, but we've still got some major components to add to this case. In this episode, we're going to add some shelves and swing out panels to the upper part of the case. The doors are going to get their own shelves and swing out panels for even more tool storage. And finally, we're going to finish out our plane gallery with a couple drawers, which adds some more storage space and a little bit of personality. So let's get started.
We're bringing some of our most popular woodworking content right here to our YouTube channel, starting with this, Mike Pekovich's Hanging Tool Cabinet Video Workshop Series. If you want to build along, we've got links to the plans below. And if you like this type of in-depth content, head on over to findwoodworking.com and sign up for a free 2-week trial of our unlimited membership. You'll get access to over 75 of these long-form video workshop series, and honestly, a whole lot more.
Above our plane till, we've got a big deep space. I don't want that to go to waste, so what I'm going to do is mount some swing out panels in a shelf that'll give me even more storage up here. I'm going to start by attaching cleats to the sides of the case. I've already pre-drilled and countersunk holes, as well as cut a dado that the shelf will fit into later. Great. Now I'll cut my shelf to length and rabbet it to fit my groove. I'll just set one end into the bottom of one dado, mark the opposite side. I'll cut it just a little bit fat, just to give me a chance to trim it to the exact fit. So with the cleats in place, we can attach the doors. Now the doors I have are just simple plywood panels. And a really quick and easy way to do this is take a piece of plywood, rip a strip off of it, and screw a couple hinges on the face. That's what I planned on doing on this cabinet, but if you give me too much time to think about something, I'm going to come up with a more complex way to handle it. So instead of just surface mounting the hinge, I wanted to go ahead and mortise it in. But the plywood wasn't thick enough to let me do that, so I had to add a hardwood cleat to the edge. Instead of just gluing that on, I went ahead and cut a groove and a tongue in my plywood to fit it together. This is a much stronger joint because there's going to be a little bit more stress here due to the hinge. Then I was able to mortise it in using the same technique I used for our hinges on the case. I added a wide stile, also made in beech. The reason I'm adding such a wide stile here is that as the door opens, I wanted there to be clearance between the side of the case and the face of the door to allow me to hang tools on it. The way I'm going to start hanging the doors is I've already mortised them. I'm going to pre-drill for the holes. Then I'm going to start by screwing the stiles in place, finally attaching the doors. Just aligning the hinge with the back of the door. This is a special bit. It's spring-loaded with a drill bit inside. What this does is allows me to center the bit in the hinge hole. When I drill, I'll have a perfectly centered hole. By the way, these hinges have loose pins. The only thing I have to remember is that I install them the right way, otherwise I'm going to be out of luck. Looks pretty even. I'll go ahead and get those hinged. We'll see how they look. So here's one advantage of having hinges with loose pins. You don't have to hold the door in place. Take the leaf off, screw it in, so you can pop the pins back in and you're all set. At least that's the theory anyway. Oh, not too bad. All right, we'll get a magnet to hold those doors together. Things are looking okay. I'm using a flathead screw to contact the magnet. And I'm leaving it proud of the surface to compensate for the wider strip I have at the hinge end of the door. So we can move on to the doors now. They're going to get a couple shelves and a swing out panel of their own. We're going to start with the shelves. All right, the way I attach the shelves and the doors is dirt simple. I pre-drilled some holes before we glued up the case. Now I'm just going to drill some holes through the side into the shelf, tap in some pins, done. The trick here is how do we hold the shelf in place while we're drilling. I'm making that easy enough just by making a couple spacers that I'm going to register against the bottom of the case, slap the shelves against them, start drilling. To hold the shelf in place while I'm drilling and pinning, I clamp it against the spacer blocks. This keeps everything lined up, which is especially important when you're driving in the pins. Here's a cool tip. Use an old piece of sandpaper to keep from marring the sides when you saw the pins flush. They're left just proud of the surface, but a sharp chisel takes care of the rest. All right, with all of our shelves in place, we're going to go ahead and install the swing out panels on the upper half of the door. So these doors are mounted just like the swing out panels in the case. I've got a style. This one's a little bit skinnier. This is going to get screwed right to the case side. I've got a spacer block set up to keep that in line as I screw it in place. Before I do that, I'm going to attach the hinge plates, then we'll get going. Before I go ahead and put the door in place, I'm going to attach a little stop block with a magnet in it on the opposite wall. The block itself is basically the same height as our spacer. The magnet is going to contact a flathead screw in the back of the swing out panel, just like in the case. I'm going to adjust the screw until my reveal is nice and even. It's still a little bit low. I'll pull the screw back out a little bit. We'll get that up. That's nice. Let's take a look. All right, that's starting to look like a tool cabinet. I think that looks kind of neat. We still have a couple empty spots here to take care of with some dovetail drawers before we can start hanging up our tools. I'll tackle that right now. So here's our basic dovetail drawer. I have dovetails on the side and through dovetails on the front as well. Typically on a drawer front, you might have half blind dovetails, but on interior drawers like these are just fine and they go a lot faster. The bottom is just a piece of plywood, which slides into a groove in the sides, and the back is cut short to let me slip that in after I glue things up. It's a real traditional way to make drawers. By the way, I didn't groove the inside of the drawer front because on a drawer this narrow, the bottom doesn't really need that much support. Well, the only thing different about the layout for these dovetails rather than the case is that because it has to fit into a drawer box, all my dovetails are flush with the sides. So instead of setting up my marking gauge wider than my stock, I set it just to the exact thickness of the stock. And it's going to give me a fairly close fit. Obviously, this was a scrap piece of plywood. I kind of like that. I'm going to keep that on there. Okay, everything's pretty tight. I'm not going to throw any clamps on there. Looks nice and square. I'll just let that set. Once it is, I'll get a hand plane on there, clean it up, get a nice fit. We'll be ready to start hanging up some tools. One of the last things I like to do when fitting a drawer is take a shoulder plane and plane the bottom edge of the drawer front so it's slightly relieved from the sides. That way it won't scrape when you're closing it. Great. I'll go ahead and add some drawer stops to the back of the drawers, but basically, the case is done. So in the next episode, I'll show you a variety of ways to hold tools. Everything from chisels to spoke shaves, combo squares, even dovetail saws. So come on back.